welcome Paul Aronsohn. We've had some ongoing conversations, and as some of the work we've been doing on the advocacy side of Miriam's Heart, we just wanted to invite him into a conversation with some more people in the Miriam's Heart Network. Paul is the New Jersey Ombudsman for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities and their families, and a role that is really similar to the ombudsman role that we've been trying to develop for children. Um, and I love Paul's heart to serve families and people who are living with disabilities and to help families navigate our systems. So I'm going to throw it to you, Paul, to maybe share a little bit about your background and what your role as an ombudsman entails.
Sure. Thanks so much, Elizabeth, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here. Again, my name is Paul Aronsohn, and yes, I have the longest title in state government. I'm New Jersey's Ombudsman for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities and their families. Uh, it's a relatively new role in state government. It was created just about 8 years ago by the state legislature. It was signed into law in January of 2018 by Governor Christie, and I was appointed a few months later by Governor Murphy. So I have the opportunity to serve as the state's first disability ombudsman. And it's an office that was born out of the recognition that here in New Jersey, we have a lot of resources for individuals, children, adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. But it's a very complex system and it can be overwhelming. And particularly because we're talking about lifespan disabilities, even if you get through today's challenge, tomorrow, the next month, whatever, is a new set of challenges just waiting for you right around the corner. And so our office was created to be a resource for the individuals, for the families, to help them navigate the system, to help them find the right programs, services, supports, can make the right connections with the right policymakers, legislators, whatever we can do to be helpful. In fact, I've sort of I put the responsibilities of the office in three different buckets. And the first bucket is really that. It's really working one-on-one with individuals and families and really trying to just make sure they get those services and supports that they need and that they deserve. The second thing we do, and I probably spend about 80% of my time working directly with individuals and family members on that. The second thing is because we take a very personal approach to our work, we learn so much from the individuals and families with whom we work. And we try to sort of take that knowledge that we get and impart it, sort of inform the policymaking process here in Trenton, sharing what we learn, what we see, what we hear from individuals and families, sharing with our colleagues in the governor's office, in the different departments. And again, sort of in that role, we sort of see ourselves as like a nexus, if you will, between those making decisions and those impacted by it. And we try to really share our lessons learned so we get better policies, better processes. And the third bucket, sort of really important and sort of overarching, is we do everything we can to make sure that the voice of individuals and the voice of families is heard, and that it's heard in a meaningful way, not just on issues that might be important to that individual or family, but again, to try to inform that larger policymaking process. Uh, we're big believers in our office that the most important voice is the voice of the individual and families, and oftentimes that voice is missing. We So we always do everything we can to make sure that not only that they're sort of at the table when decisions are made, but that they're helping drive the conversation. It's really important to us. Again, take a very personal approach to the work we do. I drive all over the state. My state car's got about 145,000 miles on it now. And we do that again because obviously working one-on-one and an in-person conversation is always better. But we don't want to make everybody come to Trenton. So, we sort of bring Trenton, if you will, to folks. And able to sit with families in their living rooms, in their kitchens, local coffee places. And it helps us not only to help them, but again, it gives us a better sense of the challenges that they're facing and the opportunities too. And we can sort of take that back and again, share that with our colleagues. Um, as for myself, we have a small team here, 5 of us full-time and an intern covering the whole state. Uh, Most of us have a personal connection to disability. In my case, I'm a sibling. I had an older sister who had developmental disabilities. In fact, all three of my siblings have had a mix of disabilities or health challenges, which has really sort of educated me and also, sort of not only informed me, but it has inspired me and really sort of lit the fire. And so I come to this with a lot of passion, personal passion, as well as, that which we get from our close working relationships with individuals and families.
It's really awesome. I think we have a kindred spirit in the leadership of Miriam's Heart and sort of the leadership of your team. It has a very a kindred way of doing things. We call it our DNA here at Miriam's Heart, that we're connected personally to adoption and foster care, and I think there's some overlap with the families that you're helping and the families that we're helping. There tends to be families who are struggling with the needs of kids that maybe they're trying to wrap their arms around what it might look like to parent a prospective placement in an adoption setting, or we have a lot of similar heartedness, and that's part of the reason why we wanted you to join the call. I'm curious. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but I wonder if you would share what you think. What do you think the thinking was when they created your office? Like, what gaps do you think were there um, to be the catalyst for the creation of the protections for people with developmental disabilities?
Sure. Yeah. One of the first things I did when I became the ombudsman was to sort of reach out to the legislators that were behind it, some of the primary sponsors of the legislation, sort of pick their brains and what was the thinking, what was their expectations. And, to a person, there was a recognition that, this can be hard. I mean, having a lifespan disability, having a loved one, a child, a daughter, a sibling with a lifespan disability can be challenging. And, one of the key challenges is, learning what's available, information. And as that saying, you don't know what you don't know, and a lot of folks don't know what exists. And a state like New Jersey, we do have a lot of resources, which is great, but you need to know how to find them, how to access them. And so I think the key thing was, just being a resource. That was the main thing, a place where families could turn, individuals could turn. We don't have all the answers, but we can maybe get them for them, or point them in the right direction. We always tell folks, when we give them some advice and what to do, say if it doesn't work, come back to us. We'll keep trying, and we'll keep trying. And so that was the main thinking. I think some of the sponsors also recognize that individuals and families need an advocate. Sometimes it's hard, folks that with disabilities and family members are often find themselves sort of feel like they have to fight for things all the time. They have to education, housing, healthcare, and it's hard, and it can be, it can take a lot out of them, and some folks just don't have the bandwidth. What we do in this office is we help them advocate, anything we can do to strengthen their advocacy, and again, make sure their voice is heard. Sometimes we'll advocate for them. We do that, different ways, including through an annual report that I do for the governor and for, frankly, anyone who will read it. It's on our website. We use that as a platform for sort of telling the story that families tell us, and also making recommendations on their behalf, if you will.
I'm attaching that report to the callers and the folks that registered for this conversation so that they can skim it, read it, memorize it. I think it's valuable. I think part of one of the reasons that we wanted to invite an audience to these conversations is I personally felt like selfish, like I was learning all of this information and feeling connected to the higher ups in our state and feeling like, man, I think our families would really value this, because a lot of those experiences you were describing could also describe what it's like, the lived experience of a foster parent, trying to figure out healthcare, trying to figure out a housing or a childcare situation, what's available. It's a lot to navigate. And so, thinking about your role and just these conversations we've been having, I think inviting folks into that and to realize that there are people who care very much about the experiences of populations that overlap with the services they're providing as an adoptive or foster parent. um, how do you think, I know we've talked before this call about your office being independent and feeling the ability to sort of advocate on behalf of families, knowing that you've got this ability to share when there are problems. How do you view that? Like, how important is that in maintaining, your authority when you're trying to protect a family or a child? Especially, and does this, in your mind, extend to our population of people who have PTSD or they've gone through trauma or childhood maltreatment?
Sure. So, the office, hmm. So technically our office is what they say in but out of Treasury. So we're in it. So if you look at my email address, the word Treasury is mostly in there. And that was done because there was a recognition that, the issues that affect people with disabilities, like the issues that affect everyone else, don't reside just in one department. And it's not just Department of Human Services, Department of Education. So I think that type of independence was extremely important because it gives a system-wide perspective and it recognizes, again, the issues just don't fall into one department. More generally, I think it's important for an office like ours to be independent if you're going to speak truth to power. And I think that's really important. If you look at our annual reports, I mean, they're we don't hold on, we say it as it is. I mean, and we try to do it. And I will say this, we go to great lengths when we're writing this report to choose our words carefully, to choose our tone carefully. But if you're going to advocate for changes, you got to have some independence, and if you're going to advocate for, whether it's changing in policy or processes, we talk about systemic changes that need to be made. You need to have some distance between yourself and the government, if you will, and particular agencies. So I think the independence is really important, and I think it has served us well. I do think, to your last part of your question, one of the things I've advocated for in terms of changing this office, now that we've done it 7.5, almost 8 years, is that we should really broaden the scope of the office. Again, it's focused on those with lifespan disabilities, intellectual or developmental. I really think it should cover folks with all disabilities, and in that bucket, I include mental health, I include physical disabilities. There's a lot of overlap, first of all, and second, I think all folks with disabilities, regardless of the type of disability, deserve to have a resource like our office, deserve to have an advocate, a partner, if you will. So that's what I'm hoping going forward.
Yes, us too. And I think, working on this together and trying to push forward a very similar office, we were encouraged when we were talking with legislators to reach out to you and to find out, if you had to rebuild your office, what would you do differently? Or if you had, if you could have a wish list of things, what would you wish for? And in those conversations, for those that weren't in those conversations, we started to realize that there might be two ways, there might be a second way for us to get to this independent oversight for the population of people that we serve, because certainly the argument could be made for the trauma experience and the child abuse experiences and some of these things that our kids are dealing with, that there should be sort of the umbrella should extend to them of having some independent oversight. And I appreciate and thank you for your open-handedness to sort of help champion for that, because vulnerable children are vulnerable. They're among the most vulnerable in our state, and we have protections for other populations. And why not New Jersey's children? So thank you for echoing that back to us, because it was just a wonderful partnership to be able to have those conversations with you. So, thinking about your annual report, what trends or issues are you seeing across the state that residents and our legislators should be made aware of?
Yes, I appreciate the question. Each of our annual reports tries to look at systemic changes that need to be made as well as issue specific. Again, so maybe I'm stating the obvious here, but people come to our office not often with a question here and there, but oftentimes with very difficult situations. Just by the nature of our work, it's time sensitive. Families are in crisis. We deal with a lot of, unfortunately, abuse and neglect in state licensed group homes for children as well as adults. We deal with folks that have severe challenging behaviors that are falling through the cracks in the system, again, children as well as adults, and medical complexities, very complex healthcare needs falling through the cracks in our system. So this is what we work on mostly in our office, and our reports reflect that. Again, we've tried to use the report and sort of as a platform again for telling this story as it's told to us. Uh, statewide, systemically, I mean, there's a lot of changes that I think should be made. In this current report, the first systemic change we've recommended is in the need for more empathy. Frankly, there needs to be more sensitivity to the often trauma filled lives of the folks that we work with. We need to understand that there should be trauma informed care training. For any of us on the front lines. We have to understand that. I think that's really important. I think also along those lines is the need for a more sense of urgency. We have to understand when somebody comes to us in time sensitive matter, we need to act. And we need to recognize the pressures that individual or that family is facing. Information is another thing. Again, system wide, there's got to be a better emphasis on making sure that people getting clear, current information. We have to place more of a premium on that. Transparency is another one we talk about. How policies are made, what policies actually exist, how money is spent in our system. There's a lot of money in the sort of disability provider world. So there's a lot that needs to be done. And again, with abuse and neglect, we spend a lot of time daily as well as in our report talking about changes that need to be made to make the investigations of allegations, more rigorous. What we need to do to hire and train and keep qualified staff in our group homes. So those are the kinds of things. Again, it's I could go on, but we try to really just use those reports to try to tell whether it's a legislator, a reporter, someone who's just potentially interested, that these are some of the main challenges. I will tell you that one of the best compliments I ever got on my report was the first year I put it out. A family member came up to me in 2019, and she said, "I read your report." She goes, "I liked it." She goes, "I didn't learn anything." She goes, "But it was good to see it on government letterhead."
Wow.
And to me, that was such an important point because it was validation. Because a lot of times we know a lot of the individuals, a lot of families we work with feel like they're screaming in the wind sometimes, and not being heard. And to me, for them to say, that they know we're hearing them and we're seeing them was really important.
That's terrific. I think that's great to know that you actually are demonstrating or sort of at least representing this increased empathy, right? Like, even if I can't change your circumstances, I will be in your circumstances with you and help you, try to navigate through them. I think that says a lot. It says a lot about your office and a lot about your character and the DNA of what you guys are doing. Um,
And I will say, if I could, just along those lines, I mentioned earlier we take a very personal approach. Again, we talk on the phone, we talk through video meetings now, and whenever possible, in person, in an individual's home, community, what have you. And we've done that since the beginning because it seemed to me, when we were sort of starting out and without much of a map, roadmap for us, that the missing piece was the personal touch. Right. So a lot of times folks are dealing with government, either you don't get your phone call returned or your email returned or you're dealing, just these faceless, nameless people. And we wanted to we felt, if anything, again, we can't solve every problem, but at least we can, hear you and see you and experience it with you to the extent we can. And, again, I give my personal cell phone out to people, email, just whatever we can to have that personal connection. I think that's so important.
I think that's great. It speaks a lot about your office and how important it is to have that person that you can call, and that's kind of leads me into my last few questions and thoughts for you about how do people reach to you and at what point do they reach to you and what kinds of problems does your office help to resolve?
So they can reach us, and there's many ways. First of all, we have a website. It's got our telephone number on it. It's also got the general sort of email box, but it also has our direct emails. I'm a big believer in that. I give out my cell phone number again, my personal cell phone. Again, coming from a disability family, I just know that personal connection, is important. And I encourage, people don't abuse it, but if they need to reach me on a weekend or a night, by all means do it. So, and we also have a web form on so any way you can do it. And one of the things we haven't done, which maybe the next ombudsman will do, I've stayed away from having like an intake form because folks come to us usually in time sensitive way. I didn't want to give them yet another form to fill out before. I want to make it as easy for them just to connect with us. I think we need to tighten that up a little bit, maybe. But again, I don't want to. I don't. I think it's been good not to require it of folks. Sometimes people come to you when they're in crisis. The last thing they want to do is tell you the same information they've just told 10 other people. And so, in terms of the issues, what people come to us with, big issues, small issues. Sometimes it's just a one-off question about something. Oftentimes, though, it's an ongoing conversation. Family might come to us with one issue, but then, weeks later, months later, they have another issue, question. So we encourage people to come to us. Don't hesitate. Just reach out to us at any time. And again, we tell folks, if it doesn't work, come back to us, and we'll try something else. We'll keep trying.
That's great. Well, we're down to the last couple of minutes. I had one question that we emailed you, and I wasn't sure if you wanted to try to tackle that now or if you wanted to just write us back the response. We'll send it to folks after.
What was it again? I forgot.
That last one was, you've said on calls with us that this job has been a labor of love. What keeps you going?
Yeah, it really has been labor of love. I mean, and I say that as, again, a family member myself, but also someone who has the opportunity to work one-on-one with individuals and families who invite you into their lives, and often in very difficult moments. So it definitely has been a labor of love. And I think that's true for all of us, in the office. I will say, though, and I put this in the last annual report, this has definitely been the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life. And I've had some great jobs and opportunities, but this has definitely been the most rewarding. But it has also been the most heartbreaking and in times infuriating. It's what keeps me going is knowing that we on a daily basis we can help. We have the ability, we have the opportunity to help folks, and it really doesn't get better than that. It really doesn't.
Well, I can't thank you enough for the work that your office does, your willingness to be an empathetic leader and to create that environment within your office, and for using this role, which has been rewarding, as you said, heartbreaking and at times infuriating, but continuing to do it to the advancement of families and children and people that are coming to your office for help. Thank you for what you've done and for your partnership in helping to extend these protections for young people. We can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks for what you do also and how you do it. It's important.
Thanks again, Paul. We'll talk again with you soon.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And I know Paul's got to step away, but I just wanted to just end the call and say thank you for joining and look forward to the next Voices That Matter session hosted by Miriam's Heart and friends. Thanks. Goodbye.